I know this title is going to sound a little bit strange, but today I want to show you how I make a sound. The reason for that is lately I've been thinking a lot more about just doing interesting stuff with individual sounds. Sometimes that means that I just open up a preset that is already doing interesting stuff. So for example, this Omnisphere preset here. Really cool delay stuff. Other times it means that I have something like an atmosphere that is actually becoming part of the build-up. Normally I would just have atmospheres that just do atmospheric stuff and not really anything else. And even crazier examples are stuff like this, where we have really cool combination of sounds like this guy and this guy, which are a glitchy sequence and a glitchy vocal, which together make stuff like this. Which is just a really cool glitchy part for this part of the track. But what I want to do in this video is I want to show you kind of that process from scratch, from start to finish. And I think I'm going to do that for one shot in this part of the track over here. As you can hear, definitely missing something in the middle here. So what I would like to do is just experiment a little bit with some rhythms. I think I'm going to do a 2-bar one shot here. Let's just write down a single note. 1, 2, 3 octaves down. I'm going to start off the way that I usually start off my sound design sessions. And that is by opening up Serum, going into my tones pack and just choosing a random shape here. That is already cool. What I would like to do is experiment a little bit with a technique that I've seen Mind B use a lot. And that is that you make an LFO that is doing your filter modulation. Let's say it's doing something like this. And then you're going to have an LFO that is going to do volume. And by combining these two modulations, you're going to get interesting interplay between the rhythm that is being generated by the volume and the rhythm that is being generated by the actual filter. So say we do something like this on the volume. Let's hear what that sounds like. We might need a little bit more content in here, just to hear some more stuff. Something like that is interesting, but of course right now the sound is fairly boring. So what I want is first of all a little bit of stereo width by just getting a few extra voices and turning the detune down a little bit. That is already interesting, but let's get some beef out of it with... I'm going to do a little bit of both here. Use it for some blur. You can hear that it creates this nice, almost like phasing effect. Then I'm going to use the compressor, set it to multiband, turn the below up and turn the gain up a bit. That is going to get us a nice, more modern sound. We can also get a more modern sound by doing a little bit of phase dispersion, which we can do with the new diffuser filter. Just setting the stages all the way up and doing something like this, maybe before the compressor. That's cool, but I also would like a little bit more distortion. So I'm going to go with the new overdrive in here. Again, set this a little bit higher so that we get a little bit more of a modern sound out of it. And it's going to have a very similar effect on the phase as the diffuser does. You can hear that we get those nice like clicks and slaps and that kind of stuff out of it, which is really what I'm after. Now quickly before we continue, I do quickly want to say that there are several different ways that you can support the channel. First of all, you can just like and comment and subscribe and all of that kind of cool stuff. But there's also several financial ways that you can support the channel, either by checking out some of my products, becoming a member on one of the premium services that I'm on, or by checking out some affiliate links for interesting plugins and products. But thank you if you do any of those things. Now let's get back into the video. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to do a little bit of post-processing. So first of all, EQ to remove any of the lower frequencies that we don't want. And then we're going to need delay, which I'm going to do with Echo Boy Jr. Just a 1/8 dotted. And then I'm going to go with the space variant here, which is a little bit darker. And then we're also going to need the reverb, which is going to, of course, come from M Turbo Reverb. Slight studio thing here. That's cool. That already sounds cool, especially when we just hear the part of the rhythm that we actually want to play. I do think we should have a little bit more feedback, so I'm going to turn that up to here. And what I would like to do is for it to transform a little bit more into an atmospheric sound. So that is where automations are going to come in. So I'm going to, for example, turn up the dry wet of the reverb here. I'm going to take a modulation chorus MB. This is going to get us a chorus sound. I really like the 3-band chorus. I'm just going to lower this a little bit in here so that we get a little bit on the original sound itself. And then it's just going to rise up until this point. Maybe you do need a little bit of a brighter, maybe the Plex variant here. That's already cool, but what I would also like to try is using Shaper Box for a little bit of time modulation. So I'm going to set this to 1.5 bars here. And then I believe we can have this. I was hoping for more of a speeding up sound. I'm going to be honest, I don't quite understand how this curve actually works, just like by myself. So I would either need to find a preset that does what I do, or just stumble upon what I want to. Which, luckily with this setting, we absolutely did. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have that in the first part, and then automate it down so that it's doing something like that. I want to make sure that this is a little bit more contained so that it actually stops right here. What we can do is we can either have it stop here, which might work because we have that little pause in there, or we could stop it right on the impact where we have that other sound. I think this is going to be good, but I also think that we're going to need a little bit more of the sound actually coming in towards the end here of the delay sound. So I'm just going to see what happens if we turn the mix all the way up here. That's cool, but it is not really transforming into this area. It just kind of stops without an announcement that it's rising into that part. So there's a few different ways that we can do that. I don't want to do it with a frequency shifter because we already have a lot of frequency shifter stuff happening right after that. What I instead want to do is a little bit of a high pass, which is also going to be a simple way of just introducing a sound like this and having it rise into a certain point. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to go up like this. I don't want to probably go up all the way. What I do want to do is slightly raise Q here, like that. And then I'm going to set this before the utility so that the utility cuts off any like ringing that this is going to do. And now what is going to be important is tweaking a lot of these automations until we get the exact right rising sounds that we want. Let's have this guy up here so that it's connected to the resonance. What might be cool is to have an interaction with this other sound here. What I'm quickly just going to do is set up a utility for that. I know that there's already one on the channel, but this is a nice way to keep different processes separated and to keep a little bit more of an overview of what's happening in the project. And I'm just going to do a little gating happening over here so that we get something that sounds like this. And now I want to talk about a little bit of a trick when it comes to setting volume for this kind of stuff. One of the things that I'm a little bit scared about is that the tail is not really going to work when we set the volume for this part, because this part is definitely too loud. So what we might want to do is tweak a little bit. More on the output volume here. And just to show you how that is going to work, you're just going to have a setup that looks somewhat like this, where you're going to have, again, making sure that we have two different functionalities. This is the guy that actually turns off the sound, and this is going to be the guy that is going to provide the balance throughout the tail of the sound. The next step is going to be the overall volume of the sound, and the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to set where I like it, and then I'm going to turn it down another 3 dB. The reason why I do that is because when I'm working on new sounds, I have this tendency to keep it too loud in my production mix. Of course, I have my whole process where I'm mixing everything in Reaper by exporting every individual track and then re-importing it into a Reaper project, which is going to be my actual mix. In this case, I'm more talking about the production mix, where it is also important that you have a general idea of a volume balance that actually works, so that when you're adding new elements to the track, there aren't elements that are overwhelming it, or there aren't elements that are going to be very much in the background that in the final mix you're going to turn up by quite a lot. And therefore in the final mix you're going to have less space than you think you have in the production, which can cause you to add too many elements to a certain part of the track. So that is definitely something to avoid and to be careful of. And that is the reason why I have this habit of just turning everything down a little bit more than I initially like when I'm still focused on the sound and when I still like the sound so much that I want it to be, upfront in the mix. It is just a way that I've learned to, over the years, get closer to what the sound actually needs to do in terms of volume balance in a production mix, as opposed to the actual value that I'm setting just by ear in the moments that I still really like the sound. So now we have this cool transition, almost like a double rising up effect, in the sense that we're rising up here. We have this little stutter thing here, which I really like. And then we have the actual build-up that is then preparing us for the next section and the part of the track where it really gets into it. So that is, in essence, going to be how I make a sound. If you like this kind of content, make sure that you leave a like and leave a comment on what you would like to see me make next. Another way to support the channel is to check out my products, which you can do over on Gumroad, Payhip and Adrenocom's community store. All three of those are linked in the description, so just check them out and see if there's something that interests you. And thanks if you do that. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.